Hey everyone, my name is Bobby Birstock and I'm a partner engineer at dbt Labs. And I'm really excited to be with you today to talk about dbt. And I'd really like to thank Class Method for inviting us to take part in DevelopersIO 2022. Today, our main focus is going to be discussing dbt Cloud, so its features, how to use it to build data transformation pipelines, and also how it differs from dbt core. And we'll spend most of our time in dbt Cloud itself, and I'll be demonstrating how to use its main features. But before we get there, I'll also give you a quick refresher into what dbt is. So let's get into that and get started. So dbt Labs is the company that makes dbt the product, and dbt the product is a data transformation framework that helps data analysts and data engineers to build and run analytics transformations in their data platform. It's also a collaborative tool at heart with a focus of uniting data teams in one place to build these transformations together. And the teamwork extends beyond individual organizations. There are now over 32,000 members in our community Slack, and the community Slack really embodies what it means to collaborate, as it is a fantastic resource to ask questions and learn about what other folks are creating. The dbt viewpoint is to build data like developers build applications. And it really centers around two main concepts, which are uniting on SQL and working like engineers. dbt's framework centers around using SQL because it's the most widely used language among data professionals. Every data team has SQL experts, and it allows dbt to interface with data platforms and data warehouses. And we want data teams to build data products and data models like software engineers build applications, because it's the next logical step in the evolution that analytics as a practice is going through. Using modular code helps teams avoid duplicating existing work. Built-in testing and documentation are certainly a best practice for any model that you build, and continuous integration allows teams to continue shipping work quickly and accurately. And all of these together create a suite of best practices that are incorporated into the dbt framework. To clarify where dbt fits in the data ecosystem, it's the transformation layer that sits on top of a data platform or data warehouse. So in this graphic, you've got different types of source data that feed into your data platform. And once it's there, it needs to be cleaned and transformed to meet business needs. You then use dbt to build these transformations. And when you're ready to run your SQL, dbt will compile your code and push those queries down to the warehouse to run. So dbt serves as the interface for development and deployment, but at the end of the day, all of your SQL is run in your data warehouse or your data platform, and you'll get to see this in action as we go through the demo. Okay, so now let's take a quick look at how dbt core is differentiated from dbt cloud so that you can understand those differences between them a bit better. And we'll get started with dbt core. So dbt core is an open source tool, and it includes all of the basic things that you need for managing data transformations according to analytics engineering best practices. Included in this is the workflow that dbt is most known for that makes it easy to develop, test, and document your data transformations, with the caveat that the interface that folks generally interact with tends to favor more technical users. You have to install the CLI in a reasonably technical way, make sure that all of your networking is set up correctly, and configure a third-party scheduler to run your transformations once they've been built. And in terms of the day-to-day, the three screens that you see here on the left of the slide represent how development work gets done. So through the command line, a text editor, and a SQL compiler. And that's a very standard setup for dbt core, but it's not for everyone given the time investment that's required to both set up and maintain the necessary infrastructure, as well as train current and future analysts and developers on how to use it. So for those that are looking for a more turnkey solution, we have dbt cloud. And we consider dbt cloud to be the fastest and most reliable way to deploy dbt. It includes everything that we new analysts needed to focus on what they do best. And as a quick example, those three tools that you're using all the time to develop in dbt core, as we saw on the last slide, those are consolidated into a single browser-based IDE in dbt cloud, so you can develop, view logs, and troubleshoot in one space. And troubleshooting is a big value add of the IDE, even for folks that are comfortable using the command line. But it's not just an IDE. We removed any unnecessary complexity that made the analyst's job harder than it already is. So our goal in dbt Cloud is to improve cross-team collaboration by enabling analysts and engineers to focus on what they consider to be their most high-value work. And this includes the ability to develop, test, and document, just like in dbt core, but also includes a Git-enabled version control workflow, custom job scheduling, and the ability to build CI/CD workflows while managing your environments all in one place. And instead of walking you through a bunch of other slides to show you all of this, I figured that we'd just go straight into the demo so that you can see it in action. So let's do that, and let's move over to dbt Cloud. So here we have the dbt Cloud IDE, and there's a couple things that I want to point out about it before we get started. The first is that this project is connected to a Snowflake data warehouse. So everything that we do here is connected to a Snowflake account and a Snowflake data warehouse. There's also a few key pieces about the IDE that you should know about. The first is that it's a text editor. So you can see that this box here allows us to write and edit text and also create the files in which we are doing that. There is a preview button here. It's is our SQL runner. So if I click this button, it will then compile this code and push it down to Snowflake in this case, and return the results of this model for us directly in the IDE so that we don't need to switch back and forth between dbt Cloud and Snowflake or any other data platform to get those results. It is also it has a command line interface. So here at the bottom, we've got the run bar, and we'll be going through a few examples of how you can use the run bar to run your dbt models and test them a little later in the demo. And up at the top in the upper left-hand corner, we've got our Git workflow button. And this is super helpful, particularly for teams that have analysts or developers that aren't as familiar with using Git at the command line. It allows you to still version control all of your work here in your project through this simple Git workflow. Okay, so to get started, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to walk through the lineage that we have here and show you how we've moved through this, what some of our dbt best practices are along the way, and cover the main pieces that I've already discussed that you do get when you're using dbt core, so developing, testing, and documentation, but show you how that happens in dbt Cloud. So what we'll get started with here are sources. And sources are the node on the far left of this lineage diagram. They are the green nodes that we can see here, and they are the beginning of our data transformation process, and they are pieces of data that live outside of dbt. So let's see how we declare those. We do that within a YAML file, and I'll open that up here. This is the source YAML that we are using in order to declare our sources. And the way we do that is by giving it a name. So this is a name that we provided for it. And then showing dbt where in Snowflake, in this case, the data lives. So it lives in the raw TPCH database within the TPCH SF1 schema, and then in this case, in the orders table. So that alone is all we need in order to show dbt where this source data is. There's also a few other key pieces of information here that we'll cover in just a bit when it comes to testing and documentation. But the key thing to note is that you can apply the same testing and documentation best practices to your sources in addition to your transform models downstream. So now that we've got our sources, let's move over to our staging models. And our staging models are something that we recommend as a best practice at dbt. And we recommend building one staging model for every source so that you will have a one-to-one relationship between your sources and your staging models. We recommend in staging models doing some very light transformation. So here you can see that we're just doing some renaming. It would also be a great place for recasting so that all of those changes happen or only happen in one place and are carried through to any other model downstream that is referencing this data. The other thing that I'll point out at the top here is the use of the source function. This is a really important function in dbt, and there's a couple of things I want to point out about it. One is that it is what allows this lineage to be created. So you can see here that we've got the connection between our orders source and our staging model here. The connection here that dbt is making is because of the source function. The source function is allowing for that connection to be created. The other thing that I want to point out is that by using the source function, it makes it very easy to oversee changes to your sources. So let's say that your source data actually changes locations. Let's say that the database changes for whatever reason. The only place you need to make that change is here in the source YAML file. Everything else is already taken care of because the source function here is referencing the name of the source that we gave it and the orders table itself, and it will automatically recognize the new location if you update it in the YAML file. And also, if you only have that source function in the staging model itself, there's only one place where it is reading, and there are no other places where you need to make that change. So it makes the change management process much simpler as well. Once we've got that set, you've got your staging model set up, now we're ready to move into our transform models. And this model is it's got a little aggregation happening here. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the SQL itself. It's simply some aggregations on some retail data to get some sales amounts and associated values for those orders. And I'm going to actually run this model down here at the bottom at the command line so that we can take a look and see what's actually happening when we run this model. So when I provide this command to dbt, what I'm saying is I want dbt to run this model specifically. The -- select fact orders is saying I want it to run this model only. And in doing so, dbt is then compiling the code from this model and pushing it down to Snowflake to run on the warehouse. And we can see that this model completed successfully. And when I open it up, there's a couple of things that I want to point out. The first thing is that dbt wrapped our code in DDL for us so that we didn't have to. So we can see that this create or replace table statement at the very top, dbt put that there for us. And another thing I want to point out is that the place that it created this model is my personal development schema. So within this project, this IDE has a configuration associated with my development environment. And I have configured it so that every time I run something at the command line in the dbt Cloud IDE, it builds in my personal development schema within this database. Okay, so dbt is doing that for us so that we don't have to. The other really important thing to point out here is within these first two select clauses. So I'm going to bounce back to the model itself. You can see that the first two CTEs that we have here, we've got the ref function instead of the actual model name. And the ref function is probably the most important function in dbt, and it does two important things. One is that it's also allowing for these relations between models to be created. So the maintaining of our lineage is part of the ref function's job. The other thing is that it makes it really easy to move code between different environments. So we're selecting in these two select statements from the stage TPCH orders model and the order items model. Okay, if we go back to the run results, we will see that dbt has compiled the code to reference the stage TPCH orders model within my development schema. And same thing for the order items model. It is within looking at the order items model in my development schema. And this is really important. The ref function is doing this for us. And when we're ready to move this code to a production environment, the ref function will correctly compile this code to the appropriate production environment that we have configured. And that all happens within dbt Cloud, and there is no other change that you need to make to this file here. So there is no need to update anything in the file when you're ready to move code between different environments. The ref function takes care of all of that for you. Cool. So now that we've built our models, we are ready to test them. And testing in dbt in dbt Cloud is very simple, and it happens in the same way that we run our models. So I'm actually going to come back down to the command line here and update this command to run dbt test -- select fact orders. That means that we just want to test the fact orders model and run all of the tests associated with that model. And while that's running, I also want to show you how we've defined those tests. So that's also done within a YAML file. And here we have put the name of the model. We've also provided a description. That's how we are creating our documentation. And you can see that below that we've listed out columns and tests beneath them. So for example, this order key here, we are saying that we want to test whether or not this order key is unique and not null. And these two tests are 2 of the 4 out-of-the-box tests that dbt comes with. You also have the ability to write custom tests in dbt, but these are 2 of the 4 out-of-the-box tests that we are applying to this order key model and that have been run in our run down here. So if I go and I open up the results, we can see that we've got a not null test that ran as well as a unique test that ran both on the order key. The other test that ran was this foreign key or relationships test, in which we are checking to make sure that the customer key in the fact orders model also exists as a customer key in the dim customers model. So all of that is happening, and the defining of those, generic out-of-the-box tests, that's happening within the YAML file, and you can run those tests within the same, IDE interface as you've done all of your development. And once you've completed all that, we're ready to actually look at our documentation. And if I open up the docs here, we can see that we've got our documentation page for our fact orders model. We've got some pieces of information that are coming over from Snowflake itself about the table. We also have the description that we provided at the table level, as well as all of the descriptions from each of the columns at all of the column levels. We can also see the different tests that were applied to the order key and the customer key columns. And if we click on this little button in the bottom right-hand corner and expand it, we can see that same lineage graph that we saw before in the IDE, except a little bit more full-featured. So when I say that I want to see everything, and I update the graph, we can now see the entire project here within dbt's documentation feature. And this is a really great feature, particularly for teams that have large projects that are having discussions about architecture. It's really easy to come in to the documentation site and pull up the DAG, pull up the lineage graph, and be able to have those discussions with much better context about your project. Okay, so that wraps up kind of the main concepts that are from dbt core that also we are able to to do in dbt cloud, and show you how you are able to utilize those concepts and apply them in dbt cloud. And I'll pop back over to our slides here to do a little wrap up. So from a development standpoint, we were able to develop and manage from a unified browser-based environment, save time with an IDE built for dbt and streamline debugging, and navigate and interact with an automatically created and self-updated DAG. From a testing standpoint, you can apply tests to your models quickly and easily, and evaluate your tests in the same interface that you use to develop. And from a documentation standpoint, you're able to easily explore your data catalog and describe business logic and share it in a format that stakeholders can understand. So now that we've covered all of the main concepts associated with our with dbt cloud that are also kind of those same major pieces from dbt core and the major dbt framework pieces, now we're going to move over to look at some specifics about what you can do in dbt cloud and what you can use dbt cloud for that go beyond the capabilities of what dbt core alone provides you. So I'm going to pop back into dbt cloud here, and I'm going to show you and give you the layout of what I've got set up here. Okay, so now we're back in dbt cloud, and now we're going to focus on a few of the features that are unique to dbt cloud and allow you to, in this particular case, very easily build and test your models before they move to a production environment, as you're promoting code from a development to a production environment, to make sure that everything will build successfully when you finally get there. And that's our Slim CI process that allows you to do this within dbt cloud, both to handle the environment as well as and the configuration of that environment, as well as building the job associated with running this. And what I'm going to do is first just lay out what I have here. So I have a feature branch that I have created that is separate from my main branch. And I have done some work within that feature branch to create a new model. So this model is very simple. If I preview this model, we should just get the results of these 2 rows here. So the model is not necessarily the important thing, but the fact that I created it is, and I've also created a couple tests associated with this model. So that's this down here. We can see that it has a unique and a not null test associated with this ID, which we expect to pass because both values are unique and not null. So what's going to happen here is that I'm ready to move this from my development environment to my production environment. But in that process, I am going to be creating a pull request from my feature branch to my main branch in my Git repo. And as part of that creation of that pull request and the pull request process, I want to make sure and double check that this model is going to build successfully and that the tests are going to pass. And that's what our Slim CI feature allows you to set up and oversee within dbt Cloud. So let's kick off that process first, and then we'll dive into the details. I'm going to first click on the Open Pull Request button in the upper left-hand corner here, and that's going to take us to GitHub. We'll be able to see all of the changes that we made. So here are the new tests, and here is the new model. And I'm going to create this pull request. And what we'll see is that there's going to be a little check that starts popping up here in GitHub. And this check, as we can now see, is in dbt Cloud itself. And if I click on the details, now we'll be able to dive into what's actually happening here. So dbt Cloud has started a run to check to see whether or not all the changes that we made and all the tests that we created are going to build and pass successfully. And these are associated with a CI/CD environment and a CI/CD job. The important things to note about the environment are simply that you have the ability to set up environments and configure them in dbt Cloud. If I click on the settings here, I can see the settings and the specific connection that we've got for this CI/CD environment. And if I go into the job itself, this is the really important stuff here with regards to this particular process. And we can see exactly what's happening. So I can see that this job is associated with the CI/CD environment that I set up. And very importantly, when this job is executed, we are saying that we want it to defer to a previous run state. So what we're telling dbt is we want it to look at the most recent successful run and the artifacts from that successful run from this other job, which is just our main job that runs all of our models in production. So this is just looking at what was the last successful run of all of our production models. And let's compare what the changes that we have in our feature branch to the state of that last successful run. And the way that we're doing that is through the commands here. And we are saying, okay, we want to only run the models where the state is different, where there have been changes to the models, or if that model is brand new. And with this plus sign, we want to run all of its downstream dependencies as well to make sure that any of the changes that we made didn't cause any cascading errors downstream. Same thing goes for testing. With this second command in the job, we are saying we want to test all of the models that have been created or have been modified, and also test any of the models that are downstream. So these are the two commands that are happening in the pull request behind the scenes when we create that pull request, or that, excuse me, they are happening in dbt Cloud when you create the pull request in GitHub. And there's a webhook here that you can use to trigger this. So this is how it's actually getting triggered. Okay. Looks like our job has completed. We can see that because we've got a green check mark here in GitHub, and we can actually go into the run itself here within dbt cloud to see what happened. And we can open up the logs here at the bottom to see that we've got the one new model that we created that is called my first dbt model. It was successfully created for us here. And also our tests, we had 2 tests that we created. Both of those are here and both of those passed as well. And we don't have any other downstream models that ran as part of this process because there weren't any that we created. But if there were, those would also have run both in the model section, the models would have run, and the tests associated with those models would have run in the test section. So this is a quick view of exactly how you can create environment and set up a CI/CD job to make sure that anytime that you create a pull request from a feature branch to a production branch, that you can test those models and create those models and make sure that everything is going to build successfully so that you don't have any unexpected surprises when you actually merge those models with your production branch and run those models in production. So that's going to do it for our demo here today. I want to thank everyone again